Welcome to the Happy Disruptors podcast. If you're a creative thinker with an unconventional approach to your industry, you just might be a happy disruptor. Join your friends at the Great Outdoors Foundation for honest conversations about tackling critical issues like conservation with an uncritical disposition. If you like to smile and get things done, this is the podcast for you.
Hello and welcome to the Happy Disruptors podcast. I'm Katie Hartman, and today I am joined by Afton Holt, a dear colleague of ours, longtime partner, and just so excited to have you here, Afton. Do you want to share a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Thank you. Thanks for the invite, because these have been great. Great to see some of your guys' partners and some of their different thought takes on things and thought leadership. My name is Afton Holt. I own Corner Post. So I have been working with Great Outdoors for about 5 years now. Time goes really fast. Our team is actually works on creative solutions for agribusinesses, and those focus on agriculture initiatives. I kind of jokingly but lovingly say our team is full of Aggies who are very creative. But we take an audience first approach in everything we do. So from content, engagement, industry relations, events, digital solutions, the whole point is that we understand those agricultural audiences. Yes, the farmers and our landowners specifically, and the different audiences that make that up, because there are different ones, but also all along the supply chain. Right. So we've been doing that. This is going into year 14 of doing that. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, it makes so much sense, obviously, with the background of your agency, that when the Great Outdoors Foundation several years ago received the directive from our board, like, we really want to play a larger role in addressing some of these water quality issues, wanted to engage stakeholders up and downstream in these roundtable discussions. So you have been a part of those from day one, and we often reference those conversations today because they're still informing our strategy at the Great Outdoors Foundation. So let's talk through that original focus group. Like, what was it? What was its intention, and how do you see that feedback still shaping our objectives today?
Yeah, so to be very honest, it started as a conversation between Hannah Inman, CEO at Great Outdoors Foundation, myself, and a couple others of what needs to be done, where should focus be, what are we missing the mark on. And very quickly, through a few conversations, it became, well, let's dig in further. So I think we, unfortunately, even those, whether you're upstream, downstream, we make a lot of assumptions about our own audiences, but also others. And so it was, let's dig in, and let's not just assume certain audiences should be a part of that conversation either. So what we did first is focused on gathering, I call it a silent audit. And that silent audit went through what initiatives, coalitions, groups, associations are focused on water quality in Iowa. The list quickly became 80 to 100 long, and then kept going, right? And so a silent audit, by that I mean, who did we know was playing a part, a Google search, all the things. We started looking in where's their similarities and not. And ironically, a lot of them have the same why. And I think that's the resounding thing we saw throughout the whole project, and still today, is we all have the same why. Maybe how we get there is different, based again on who we're serving. But then that fell to the next step, which was, let's bring these stakeholders, right? These focus groups. So the first thing was making a list of different stakeholders, we call them, in different types of groups, upstream and downstream, mostly focused though upstream. And so it was not just landowners and producers, right? Because we do have a lot of data and information from them with different groups. It was, why don't we focus on our ag retailers? So that's a strong background of myself, my team, focus on that. Also, what about municipalities? What about those in economic development, county supervisors, those that, because upstream still has cities as well. And so let's focus on those and some of those rural communities. It also focused on people that finance and lend dollars. So because they do have a stake in the farmer and landowner decision making. So it included all of those. We then went through different interviews, virtual roundtables, collected just information on their takes. From there is where we discovered we have some challenges. We have some similarities, some not similarities, but we have a lot of challenges, and how can we turn those into now opportunities, which is what has kind of led us a little bit closer to where we are today.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like that was such a critical point in the evolution of the Great Outdoors Foundation's involvement in water quality, because, you hit the nail on the head. We all have our own preconceived notions and perceptions, and it was really important to Hannah and to our board that we listened first. So I'm curious, from those, and we've got Hannah offline too, so maybe you can throw your thoughts in, but was there anything surprising or maybe out of the expected that came from those conversations?
Yeah, there was two that always come top to mind for me. The first is we do have a misconception and assumption, and again, upstream and downstream, all Iowans, that egg retail somehow, and when I say egg retail, because terminology, we always have to remember different audiences maybe don't know. By this is somebody who sells a product directly to the farmer. So yes, it could be their inputs such as seed and fertilizer. It can also be precision egg. We do a lot with precision tech and equipment. Those are all egg retail. It's those that are selling those inputs. So they have a lot of people that the farmer and the landowners themselves too, if they're farming, trust those people, right? They're in there. But their revenue is based off what they sell the farmer that then is used as an input to produce. And so there's this assumption that they don't want conservation efforts on land, or they don't want land taken out of production. Yeah. That is a strong misconception out there. Mostly because if you have an unproductive, if you have 100 acres even of unproductive, maybe really sandy, right? It's in a lower spot. You're not making money off of that anyway. Right. We could put as much as we could throw all the things we want on it, and it's still not going to produce as well as another acre. So we talk about in farming and agriculture reallocating those input dollars to where they're better spent, right, for a larger yield. And instead, what can we do with those other acres? And so no way, shape, or form does egg retail say, well, that's taking business away from us, because they also know if that farmer is not there tomorrow and the next year, and they also know those farmers have regulations. So do our ag retail. They have a lot of regulations that they need to appease too. So that was number one, because, I was close to it. I already knew that, but asking those specific questions and getting that from the leaders, the decision makers at those ag retail, that confirmed it. The other one that always starts to come to mind, I just forgot what I was going to say. Was economic development. I don't know why we see this. I think for us, and maybe it's more prevalent now, that we understand economic development is impacted by water quality and conservation.
Yeah, definitely.
But I don't know if it's still as recognized in other parts of the state. And I even mean upstream. So we did talk with those in county government, those in municipalities, those that truly had an economic development title. And this is going to be more our rural communities. And in asking them if they feel water quality and conservation impact their efforts, their local economic development efforts, it was kind of a head tilt answer. It was kind of I don't really know for sure. I don't, or maybe not directly. Yeah. And I think that right there tells us something, because and maybe we're too close to it, that we see that quality of life aspect. We know agriculture is a backbone to our economy. Our rural economies need the ag retail too. It's all one big system. Yeah. And so for that not to maybe be associated with water quality or conservation at the time we did this, which has now been nearly 4 years.
Yeah.
So even in that amount of time, things have changed. If we would go back and ask those questions now, it'd be interesting to see if that has changed. But that told us there is some education to be done.
Yeah. So let's dig into that a little bit, because really the feedback that was collected wasn't just to confirm or dissuade, our perceptions. It was so that we, along with our partners who are working in conservation and ag, could start to coalesce around solutions for those common themes of either challenges or obstacles or maybe pain points in the system. So maybe let's dig into what those were. What were the common requests from those stakeholders?
Yeah, the first and foremost, which we still are battling, and I don't say we as in just Great Outdoors Foundation, I mean collectively, a lot of organizations and people and boots on the ground, red tape. Red tape. Yeah. So from a funding perspective specifically, if it's public funding, red tape. And or regulations in terms of that, or how that money has to flow and how it's going to get to the farmer. And red tape usually means longer timelines. And the thing with agriculture, specifically here in Iowa, right, is we've got yearly growing seasons annually. And so we're already making decisions. Right now, a lot of farmers are starting to make their decisions or have made their decisions on what acres are going to be soybeans, corn, what's going to be put into conservation. They're looking at those numbers from this last year. And so we're thinking ahead. And I think we probably need to focus a little bit more on how the farmer makes those decisions. And that was an education thing too. So that people maybe not understanding would be another one of how decisions are made across the supply chain, by the way. And then where does funding come from? The other thing we heard, and I've created this like kind of, tongue-in-cheek saying, is that we've muddied the water by providing so many resources. And by resources, that could be funding, that could be education, that could be technical service, that could be all these things, all these coalitions, that silent audit I said, it's all great. I don't want any of it to go away. Right. I wanted to find a way for us to align it and make it more transparent of what is what. Because what we hear most often is, I know there's a lot of stuff out there, but I don't know where to go for what. Yeah. And we get decision fatigue.
Absolutely.
Pretty quickly as humans. And so that was the other resounding thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So that kind of starts to get into, and we've covered this on a number of episodes, but the Conservation Acceleration Fund and looking at how we can use private dollars to maybe supplement or perhaps like assist with the cash flow, provide some patient capital in terms of like the reimbursement cycle. And then the resource that you're referencing, we are really excited to be sharing more about that in 2026. But one thing that is common throughout those solutions that were developed is, it's not just the Great Outdoors Foundation working on it. So I'm curious, I feel like you've had a front row seat to some of this progress. Who are some of the other partners that you see, again, like coalescing around these common themes and working to address them?
Yeah. The most obvious, maybe to us, and I have to remember that again, that front row seat of seeing this, are in agriculture specifically, our commodity and ag groups have always been focused on conservation and water quality, but maybe not to the degree of implementation. A lot of education, advocacy was done. But now we see them getting involved in trying to partner, even from a funding perspective. How can we get more implementation on the ground? Our conservation agronomists, which you've had on the podcast and talked about that several times, that was one of the priority strategies that came out of these focus groups and conversations. And so whether that's through an entity like an association or privately with an ag retailer, agribusiness, but focusing on that, I think that has been tremendous and it helps get things on the ground. Again, funding too has been another, and when we talk about funding, we got the public side too. And we're really grateful that our Department of Ag and Secretary Mike Nag have been tremendous. And his staff, I mean, not only him, because he's the one leading, but his staff are so tremendous and so involved. And I think for some of them, they've been working in this for decades.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now they're seeing maybe the fruits of that labor because they're seeing other partners realize, oh, we can work together, right? We can actually collaborate on this, which then to the Conservation Acceleration Fund accelerates things.
Most definitely.
And I think about that in my head when we were really figuring out what are the priority strategies to rally around as Great Outdoors. Not having Great Outdoors own all of those, but again, supporting and amplifying, and then to accelerate the upstream, downstream partnerships and efforts. That was the whole point. So not that you guys had to own everything. Of course, the Conservation Acceleration Fund coming out of that was one of the largest. I think that GOF really then got behind.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So talk to me a little bit, because I think you bring up a really good point of there's actually been a lot of work happening behind the scenes for decades. And I think there can be this perception of the rural urban divide and how there's this disconnect between maybe folks who are living in central Iowa and those who are in the more rural parts of the state. How do you see the upstream downstream partnerships being sort of a bridge between those two? And do you still see that at play in the conversations you're having today?
Yeah, we'll go back a little bit in time. So now, well over a decade ago, there was a lawsuit in this state. And my background, I started in the farmer co-op system. And so that's where I cut my teeth in agribusiness. And then come from a farm background and have been in production agriculture most of my life. And so upstream. And so I hail from Northwest Iowa. I'm a central Iowa farm kid, but I've spent all of my adult years in Northwest Iowa. And so when we talk about upstream, downstream, let's kind of focus on that Des Moines River watershed, Raccoon River watershed, right? And then Des Moines, I was up went all the way to Worthington, Minnesota yesterday, and I'm noticing I'm crossing legs of that Des Moines River, like as far up as it goes. And so there's a lot of stops along the way there. So a lot of upstream and then downstream we often refer to as maybe the central Iowa, Des Moines area, region. But of course, upstream, downstream can be anywhere, right? But for the sake of the conversation, what we've been focusing on is that Des Moines River and Raccoon River watersheds. So well over a decade ago, we had a lawsuit that really shook and created that divide pretty strongly. And at the time I was working for this farmer co-op. And so while we had always talked about conservation, and I've been writing content, at this time I'm creating newsletters that go to farmers, and we still do that as a company today. We had to communicate through that lawsuit that was happening in our counties where our farmers were. They're on these drainage boards that are getting sued essentially, right? And it created this divide. What I will tell you today is, number one, we have a generation of farmers and decision makers on farms coming in who didn't live through maybe that, like directly. So they don't consider that part of their decision making. What they do consider part of their decision making is Des Moines is where they go to entertain, to shop. So Des Moines needs upstream, upstream needs Des Moines. I mean, we all do truly, in Iowa we drive everywhere too. So that divide I've seen, that's why we like to say upstream, downstream and not rural urban. Fort Dodge, I call home, and that's a city in Iowa too. And so there's still upstream, downstream happening there and partnerships that need to happen. So I've seen that really smooth, and, a lot of people don't even want to discuss that law. We don't, but of course we want to keep from anything like that ever happening again, which is why collaboration and maybe even talking outside our echo chamber. And that is probably one of the things that I would push our agriculture industry and my peers and colleagues is to, we tend to like to talk in an echo chamber at times, but we will get nothing solved if we do that. If we talk amongst ourselves, we have to push past that. It's uncomfortable. It can be scary. We don't know what that other side's going to say, but neither do they.
Right.
And until we cross those barriers, nothing's going to happen. And truly, I just don't think from an upstream perspective, living that and being in Des Moines a lot, I don't see that as frequently anymore.
It was really interesting I moved to the state in 2020 and was completely unfamiliar with all of the history that you shared. And I will say, just from my own personal experience, it does seem to be shifting in a completely different direction. And it does seem to be, partly in a building back of trust, and also partly because of the new generation of farmers and landowners, which I think are able to look at maybe this holistic issue and see how beyond just, their livelihood, there are other elements as a part of being a resident that they benefit to contributing to the solution.
Yeah. And know this, it might seem cheesy to say, but there are no better stewards of the land than our farmers and landowners too. And those that work for the farmer too. We can't forget, there's, and you bring up landowners, which is obviously a topic that gets brought up. I know in our circles and in our conversations, a lot of that changing demographic, and we are going to have a lot more non-operating landowners. That's what we call it in the USDA census. That's what they refer to it as. And we're going to have more of that. And so those that are actually farming the land, to be able to have those conversations with that landowner, that's going to become even more important. Those landowners may not live here. They may be part of a lineage. They may be part of a family trust. The conversations are going to be different.
Yeah.
It was pretty easy decades ago that you could put nearly every farm in kind of maybe 3 to 4 buckets of types of business structure, how they operate, all the things. We can't do that. Those buckets, there's 100, if not hundreds of buckets of how the business is structured, because it is a business. And so that becomes a whole other thing we need to consider too, is who's making those decisions, but how can we help them communicate?
Right.
Because their wants and needs are different. But again, if we all have the same why and we can support each other and we can find tools that help both sides there too, well, then we're going to be in good shape.
Yeah. I think back to your challenge to your peers. And I think we all feel this if you're working in a space. It's the natural inclination is to shrink back and to be in this position of comfort where there isn't maybe a challenging of perspective or theory or behavior. And that's why we're so excited about Watershed. We've recently announced our water quality summit that we're hosting next year. And I think it's going to be, as we're talking to vendors and doing a lot of the planning for the conference, when you try to describe the people that will be there, it's a wide spectrum of individuals and organizations where, if there's a Venn diagram, the overlap is really just that we all want to improve water quality, and there's almost nothing else in common on the surface.
Yeah, it's wild. In all the conversations I have, I just walk away going, well, we have the same why.
Yeah.
I mean, in conversations around this, water quality or conservation, we have the same general why.
Yeah.
The how we get there is where we really start to differ. And I think that's anything. That's a political thing too, normally, like if we're doing anything from a legislative perspective, usually that's the same thing that happens, right? But I truly think with water quality, we all want a state that we can all be proud of. We all want to get along. We all need each other. I think we do realize that, again, upstream, downstream, every county is very different. We all need each other. Ag needs in other industry to support them, vice versa. So we've got the same why. The house, and that's okay. We are going to differ a little bit on the house. And that's why if I did another, audit, silent audit, if you will, maybe not so silent this time, of who's all doing efforts, it would be even more now. The why wouldn't really have changed.
Yeah.
But we've tried some different house since then even. And what I love is like with Great Outdoors Foundation, you guys have really, I usually say we, I said you guys, but usually it's we. I try to throw a we in there, but focus on what is truly working, where you guys and your donors can spend the most impactful time, and then find other partners that can fill other gaps.
Yeah.
I would hate for us to all reinvent wheels.
Right.
That gets us nowhere. But we can certainly improve those wheels. We can make them faster. We can find ways to put those wheels together. And I think that's what we're starting to see actually start. It's just taken a while.
Yeah.
And I think the public is going to start to see that. We have those that are really passionate about their work, Great Outdoors being one of them. Even our peers at IDOLS, right? Or those even in USDA, and then those at Iowa soybean or Iowa corn,
right.
They're so passionate about what we're doing. We don't take enough time. Sometimes we're too modest. We're Iowans, right? We're modest folks. So we don't celebrate and talk about what is actually being achieved. So then what ends up happening is that perception by a general public may be that there's nothing happening.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying we need to toot our own horn every day, but we certainly should be educating on what is being done so that people have an opportunity to maybe get behind something and rally around it. So that's probably the next evolution is, well, keep doing the hard work, but let's talk about it outwardly.
Yeah. And I think this was not an issue that was created overnight. So I think, to your point, there's been work going on behind the scenes that's laying the foundation and figuring out solutions. And just like Iowa's soil and water didn't just overnight transform, it's not going to be remedied overnight either. So I think as we think through like the psychology and the sociology of change, like that's another just lens that we have to be considering this challenge, because if it were that easy to just snap your fingers and fix it, like it would have been done, because no one out there is saying, yes, I want our water to have high nitrates. Like that's not.
And we're dealing with science and biology and nature, Mother Nature, who we can't control as much as we would like to, we can't. And so while that time goes on, while good work is being done, Mother Nature could throw something at us, which is something if no one, no matter how much money behind it, can necessarily like control. And so we also need to remember that. We have to remember, industry, markets, business, all of that is continuing to evolve in technology. And so by the time sometimes a solution gets implemented, there's been so many other things that have changed or shifted too. And so it's going to be a constant thing. And again, pointing fingers has never worked. I mentioned that unfortunate lawsuit. And I think that right there proved to us, well, pointing fingers isn't going to necessarily fix this.
Yeah.
Did it get attention? Certainly. Did it maybe get the right attention and it created a lot of hostility? It absolutely did. So let's bring some things to the surface. Let's not point fingers. And again, I step outside our echo chamber, bring those voices to the table. That's one of my favorite things. That's why I'm so grateful. The things I've gotten to do with Great Outdoors Foundation is facilitating those conversations that they don't have to be hard. We're getting to the core of things. And we have to remember science is a part of this. Data, true data, that we are listening to the right data as well. Then funding does become a part of the equation. We recognize that. And then how do you, again, engagement with people? And so just bringing all those, again, pulling back the curtain a little bit on how industry works, agribusiness, also our municipalities, how, we talk, I'm a Western Iowa girl, and the eastern side of the state has different, challenges that they would focus on, such as flood mitigation. It changes that water quality discussion is very different, but yet again, we all want the same. Why? So we do need to consider that too.
Yeah, most definitely. I think, we're all pretty clear on like the practices that if implemented can have the desired outcomes that we're looking for. It's just like, how do you integrate that into this very complex system of agriculture and for living? Because that's a really critical piece of all of this. You're talking about implications for utilities, economic development, flood mitigation, all protecting critical infrastructure. Like we really all do have a vested interest in coming up with a solution and addressing those delivery mechanisms that make it, we talk about giving farmers and landowners an easy button so that conservation is not something that they have to think long and hard about. It's like, yeah, absolutely. I want to be a part of that.
Yeah. If we can make it as simple as that easy button, right? That doesn't, and I know you totally didn't mean this, but that never takes away from how difficult it is to farm. Oh, and that's why that's why you're saying, that's why we want the easy button.
Yeah.
Because there are so many different circumstances they're under. And for those that are business owners or run a business, they understand every day is a different fire you're putting out. There's a different decision you're making.
Absolutely.
Which inventory program do I shift to? A farmer that is a business. That's a farming business. And it's multi-generational. No different than a lot of our other businesses, privately owned businesses. It's multi-generational. And nobody wants to be the one that the business collapses under. Nobody wants that. And that's the pressure they live with. And there's so many things out of their control. And so to your point, how do we make it easy for them to adopt those things and not make it, again, decision fatigue, but also so it doesn't have as many financial implications, because none of us want any one person to take all that financial responsibility either.
Right.
And certainly as a business owner, I look at regulations, I look at things, from even to employing employees. Every little thing we add takes away from that profit and less I can give to my employees. Right?
Yeah.
Same for farmers, less they can do. Nobody, if they run a business, nobody's income, nobody wants more taken away from that.
Right.
So how do we make this easy so that it also has some advantages as a business for them? I will say in it's kind of been a light bulb in talking with some different farmers lately. We talk a lot about diversifying the farm a lot. And I think when people in Iowa hear that, they think we need a third and fourth crop rotation. In the places where that makes sense, by all means. We won't have the market, to be very frank, we won't have the market infrastructure for them. Our co-ops are set up for a 2 commodity system. Although we do have ones, there are some different places that you can take things, or people might create their own co-op, right? And that's okay. I mean, we've got lots of people growing hops for our local breweries. Like, we've got some great things to.
Definitely.
So diversifying does not have to mean a third or fourth rotation crop. When I say that, I'm also saying they might be adding livestock back in, and they hadn't had livestock before. They might be doing a direct to consumer, selling meat direct to consumer. They're diversifying. Now, farmers need to look at this as, how can conservation efforts be another revenue stream for my business? And I don't mean that as to take advantage of anything or to feed off of somebody else. It's to help diversify.
Yeah.
And there are private funding opportunities to help with that. No different than if I'm going to raise a certain type of organic corn, and there's a feedlot in Kansas that only, markets organic beef, and they sell me a premium of 50 cents on the bushel. I'm looking for those market opportunities. That's my way of diversifying.
Exactly.
It's the same thing that we need to start looking at that conservation side as, like, maybe that's a revenue stream. And how then do we make it so it's there next year and the next year and the next year?
Absolutely. Yeah. Consistency, providing some resiliency, like physical resiliency to their property, and also like financial resiliency, because you are diversifying revenue streams. But yeah, it is not, I think that has been so enlightening, and one of my favorite parts of the job is just getting to meet the farmers who are, kind of at the, they are at the cutting edge. They are the ones who have taken this leap of faith and are going out on a limb to implement some of these conservation practices to sort of demonstrate to their peers the efficacy, whether it is in, the net profit that you were referencing earlier, and taking some unproductive acres offline, or making their yields more resilient because of the cover crops that they're using. That has been super helpful to understand from the business perspective and the human perspective of the burdens that they are balancing. We don't want conservation to be a burden. So, that's what, if there's one thing that can have an easy button on the farm, like, we want it to be conservation, because we know there's nothing else. Okay, excellent. Well, Afton, anything else you want to add before we move into our final segment we call Let's Whiteboard It?
No, I think, as I said, some of my key phrases, like, we've muddied the water a little bit, right? Because we have so much out there. I think those key takeaways of, remember, a farmer is a business owner. Yeah. We need to remember that. And truly, we need to do what we can to protect what they're doing, just like our other business owners in the state. And again, how do we make a revenue model, knowing the landowner shift is happening. And then my other key thing was collaboration is happening. Yeah. And I just wish, and some days, I think we all do, we find out something else is occurring, another collaboration. And I love that. I love people stepping across these lines maybe we've had. And it's, we just do not do a good enough job of sharing that with Iowans. And I think if we started to do that even a little bit more, they might have something to jump on and rally around that's a little more positive than it is questioning that we're not doing anything at all.
Yeah. I can bemoan the frustrations of like frequency of messaging that you have to share, because with your background in marketing, like, we think, we share this great thing, once or twice, and that already feels a little too self-congratulating. And then we find out, I was actually on a call yesterday with a partner who was like, we did this, and I was like, I had no idea, and I work with you all the time.
Yes. Can we share that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Well, so glad to have you on today. We're going to wrap up with our Let's Whiteboard It segment. So you've got a whiteboard over on your table, and you can either draw or write, but this is an off the cuff question. I think you'll enjoy it. So it's the beginning of 2026. We've got the whole year ahead of us. What is something that excites you about the year ahead as it relates to conservation and agriculture? And you can write or draw your response. While Afton is wrapping up that question, make sure to like and subscribe wherever you are listening. You can follow along with the Great Outdoors Foundation and all the work that we're doing on all major social platforms. And then make sure, if you haven't already, to head to our website and subscribe to our monthly newsletter. It's where we share the great work of our partners, some of our thought leadership pieces, and provide opportunities to get connected with our work. So, all right.
You said draw, and then I didn't draw anything, and I was like, well, now I have to draw something. So I did, and it's
excellent.
Lovely.
I'm sure it will be great. Okay, so what are you most excited about?
Tough conversations, which seems kind of silly, but that's usually what leads to the most productive conversations. So
absolutely.
Just kind of continuing to have even tougher conversations.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yep. I think that's one of my favorite things about the podcast is having a lot of different perspectives on, because every single time you engage with a different perspective or lens or, approach, the critique or the feedback that you get from partners, it only makes you understand the situation or your own position that much better. So I think it's so important.
Yeah,
so.
I've always challenged everybody to find somebody who might think opposite of you and have that conversation.
Yeah.
Over coffee, over lunch, something in a very unbiased place.
Right.
Because usually you'll walk out with probably a renewed sense and probably an idea that you hadn't before. So that's
absolutely.
Yep.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much for joining
Thank
Afton.
you.
And we will see you next time.